After President Kennedy told the world we were going to the moon, and after John Glenn made his orbit around the Earth as part of the Mercury space program, science fiction, with all its pulp sensibilities from the 1950s, was facing a crisis. Fiction was rapidly becoming fact, and the realities of space travel were becoming more well known to general audiences. The space race, though, was nevertheless stoking the fires of the imagination, encouraging the spirit of exploration and adventure that have been defining traits of the human condition since man first set out to see if there was more to the world than caves and forests. It's no wonder that science fiction films of this era are so filled with adventurism, as seen in The First Men in the Moon, The Lost World, and Mysterious Island, all of which are based on classic tales of exploration on our own celestial sphere. What makes these movies so charming, despite their reliance on sticking to the past, is that they are all, without fail, colorful and optimistic, inviting audiences to marvel at the awe and wonder of a universe just out of reach. Eventually, this era of sci-fi cinema would shift to a more gritty and realistic approach, spearheaded most famously by 2001: A Space Odyssey, but before that, between the impulse for fantasy and the need for scientific accuracy, is a special Goldilocks zone, one that maintains a sense of classic adventure, but also tries to show audiences a glimpse of a more plausible near future. And therein lies the subject of today's video. Commander Christopher Kit Draper has crashed onto the face of Mars, and help is light years away. He must conquer the problems of fire, oxygen, water, food, and shelter before he perishes on the hostile surface of our dead neighbor, and as isolation begins to take its toll on his mind, he encounters ominous evidence of other life forms. How long can Commander Draper survive on this harsh alien world? And what other secrets lie buried in the ancient Martian dust? Following the successes of the films Journey to the Seventh Planet, which he co-wrote, and The Angry Red Planet, which he directed, the former science editor for Life magazine Ebb Melchior began work on a screenplay about exploration on the planet Mars that took heavy inspiration from the classic adventure novel Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe, with the help of producer Aubrey Shank. This screenplay, under an operating title of Destination Mars, was envisioned as a big-budget A-picture that Melchior would direct himself, a 3-hour epic that featured fantastic special effects and wild Martian creatures, something more akin to 1959's Journey to the Center of the Earth than to Destination Moon. However, Melchior was forced to depart the project to work on The Time Travelers, at which point Byron Haskin was brought in to take his place. Haskin, who had previously directed The War of the Worlds and From the Earth to the Moon, among many others, envisioned the project as being more grounded in reality than Melchior had intended. As such, he hired screenwriter John C. Higgins to insert more scientific accuracy and to tighten up the story for a more manageable budget, which primarily involved removing all the Martian life forms, except for a single plant. The working title was then changed to Gravity Probe 1 Mars, but was later changed again to Robinson Crusoe on Mars. The topic of today's video was voted on by my patrons. If you'd like to have a say in some of the movies I cover, want to see bonus content, or just wish to support the growth of this channel, check out my Patreon or consider becoming a channel member. I'd like to give a special shout out to my $8 androids: Batty Bat Firebrand, Chuck Poor, Diane McGill Davis, Giffen Chumley, Jack Blair, John Burrell, Mike O'Connor, Numinous 2019, Patrick Baker, Robert McGill, Sean Vale, Spoats, TB Schrumick, and Warren Davis. I sincerely couldn't do this without you guys, so thank you all. Over 70 actors auditioned to play the lead role of Kit Draper, with the role ultimately going to relative unknown Paul Mantee, who was cast by Haskin primarily because he happened to look like astronaut Alan Shepard, if you squint hard enough. One of the actors who didn't get the part was Victor London, who instead landed the secondary role of Friday, the escaped slave explicitly named after the character from Robinson Crusoe.
Come on, Joe, or whatever your name is. No. Friday, that's it. With apologies to Robinson Crusoe.
Given that the majority of the film is just these two actors, they managed to form a working relationship and even a friendship that lasted long beyond filming, and though neither man would become a breakout star, both would find success playing heavies in movies and television for decades. For this channel, I feel the need to point out that Victor London would become the first ever Klingon to appear in Star Trek just a few years after Robinson Crusoe on Mars. It was London's idea to incorporate a Mayan dialect into the alien language he speaks in the film, hoping to reference a popular connection between Mayan culture and alien mythology. But the accuracy of his Mayan in the final film is dubious at best. The character of Friday was also originally written to be more alien and to be wearing a more elaborate alien outfit. For example, he was supposed to have a three-fingered hand, but for whatever reasons, probably budget-related, he was made more human in both physical appearance and wardrobe. The only other human actor in the film is the incomparable Adam West, who was, at the time, a prolific character actor, mostly on television, but would of course become famous for playing Batman.
Oh, better put 5 cents in the meter.
No policeman's going to give the Batmobile a ticket.
No matter, Robin. This money goes toward building better roads. We all must do our part.
Unfortunately, he only appears in 2 scenes in the entire film, one of which is merely a hallucination where he does little more than stand mute, and he dies unceremoniously off-screen in the first act. There's also a vocal cameo from the director, Byron Haskin, who is the voice on the radio who says,
"My God, a voice from Mars!"
But anyone who has seen Robinson Crusoe on Mars knows that the real star of the picture isn't a human, but rather the spunky Brazilian woolly monkey Mona, as played by Barney. Barney was forced to wear fur shorts to appear female, 1960s audiences weren't ready for full-frontal monkey penis, and had a bad habit of loosing his bowels on camera, which you can unfortunately see here. The character was originally written to be a native Martian animal named Marsa that would be made by dressing up an armadillo, but this idea was nixed, not just because Martian creatures were removed from the script, but also because it is nearly impossible to train an armadillo the way you can train a monkey.
Mona, shut up. First visitor we've ever had, and you act like a gorilla.
Filming began in early December of 1963, with location shooting done in and around Death Valley, particularly at Zabriskie Point and the Devil's Golf Course. Haskin stuck to filming high up on the ridges whenever possible, because hundreds of westerns had already made the lower areas of Death Valley familiar to audiences, and he took advantage of the cloudless blue sky by turning it into a natural blue screen, making it easy to composite in a more reddish-orange Martian atmosphere. For the record, the Martian sky is actually orange. Though it's easy to point out all the things the movie gets wrong according to modern science, you have to remember that it was remarkably accurate for its time. It was believed that there was potentially standing water on the Martian surface, and that the planet was still geologically active, and it wasn't until the Mariner probes a few years later that we learned the atmosphere is much thinner than we thought, meaning any standing water on the surface would immediately boil away and no human can survive without a pressure suit, and that the Martian geology had come to a halt millions of years ago. It's also worth noting that the art director, the great Al Nozaki, designed the spacecraft with current NASA technology in mind. The idea of a lander paired with a lunar orbiter was fairly new, and the landers you see in Robinson Crusoe on Mars look an awful lot like the freshly built Gemini craft. And yes, before you comment, that's how the NASA Public Affairs Office says it should be pronounced. The Gemini 3, the first one to launch with men aboard, didn't take flight until 1965, a year after the movie released. Nozaki was also responsible for the alien crafts, which bear a striking resemblance and make similar sound effects to the Martian invaders from the War of the Worlds, which Nozaki had also designed for Byron Haskin. They move very differently though, deliberately given a jerky, fast movement to coincide with contemporary UFO sightings, and the human spacecraft, the Eleanor M, the model of which was 3 feet long, was also made to look incredibly fast, something that would later be copied by Star Trek. Some other props worth pointing out for their prescience include a portable computer and a camera that looks a lot like the one that captured the Apollo 11 landing. Paramount, with its multiple leadership shakeups at the time, was treating the film less like an A picture at this point. Due to its reduced budget, a lot of ideas had to be scrapped, sequences had to be shortened, and Kit's cave was shrunk so much that keeping it all in frame became difficult. Some props were also recycled from earlier productions, including the spacesuits from Destination Moon, and both the radar screen and a meteoroid from Conquest of Space. Another cost-cutting measure was the use of non-anamorphic widescreen. Instead of a single wide image, the cameras essentially captured 2 standard side-by-side images that were spliced together in post-production, resulting in slightly lower resolution. Robinson Crusoe on Mars released in the summer of 1964, to high praise from critics, who lauded its ambition, special effects, and grounded reimagining of classic literature for the space age. Unfortunately, that critical praise didn't equate to box office success, because the movie flopped with audiences, perhaps due to bad marketing and distribution by Paramount, and perhaps due to its bizarre title that sounds more like an elevator pitch than an actual movie. It was put at the bottom of a few double bills here and there and quickly vanished from theater screens, no doubt failing to recoup its modest $1.5 to $2 million budget. Luckily, the Criterion Collection saved it from obscurity in the early 1990s with a loving Laserdisc restoration that was later transferred to DVD and Blu-ray. Nowadays, it is something of a cult classic among film buffs, and occasionally makes its way to fan conventions, which is where co-star Victor London started performing the song he wrote in its honor. It's great that the film has found new life in the modern age, but it's sad to see how little appreciation it got in its day. It's a fantastic little picture that really does bridge the gap between the adventure movies that preceded it and the gritty sci-fi that followed, and it does that while simultaneously managing to honor the themes of its namesake. It manages to incorporate heady ideas about the human capacity for survival and the colonialist urge to believe oneself to be superior to an other.
I'm the boss, and remember that. You get out of line just 1 iota, and I'll bring your enemies right back into this cave.
As well as giving lip service to some of the more religious overtones of Defoe's novel.
Order? God? Good.
That's right. Divine order. Good.
But it couches all of it in surprisingly believable science fiction, even if one has to suspend disbelief about how breathable the Martian atmosphere is or why there seems to be fire everywhere on such a cold, desolate rock. To me, even more than a retelling of Robinson Crusoe, it feels like 2 much later movies sutured together. The Martian, with its tale of a lone astronaut on Mars having to use science to survive, and Enemy Mine, with its story of a human and an alien stuck on a hostile world learning to work together. And hey, I love both of those movies, so take it as a compliment.
Come on. Your Mickey Mouse is one big stupid dope.
I also have a soft spot for the late 50s, early 60s colorful style of adventure film, as well as having a deep appreciation for movies that try to stick to scientific reality as much as they can. In my mind, Robinson Crusoe on Mars is almost the best of all worlds. Now, I do have to take issue with the overall pacing of the film, as the first half drags on a bit too long and the second half feels a bit too rushed. I'm also not sure the suturing of the two halves really works all that well, and I think the story needed a major overhaul to its structure to reach its fullest potential. Though a lot of blame for the movie's failure goes to Paramount for how they fumbled the release, I can't deny that maybe there's another reason the movie didn't jive with audiences. Maybe it's hard to resonate with a film that completely changes tack halfway through. I do applaud the attempts at realism, but they get undermined by the sudden appearance of aliens an hour into the movie. Regardless, Robinson Crusoe on Mars is essential viewing for sci-fi movie buffs. Byron Haskin called it the best movie he ever made, and I can absolutely see why. It's a beautiful film, both visually and thematically, and it will always stand as a sci-fi classic. And that's all for today, my fellow Earthlings. What's your favorite sci-fi adventure film? Let me know in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Thank you for watching, and until next time when we'll jack into the first in a series of cyberpunk films from 30 years ago, this is the Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love. As long as you're not hurting anybody.
What'll I fix for dinner? How about some turkey with mashed potatoes? Gravy added.
I like mine in paste form, you know, in a tube.